Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. What I want to do today is spend a little bit of time talking about Commands and Colors Samurai Battles. Mostly the things that I enjoy. I'm sure I can find a couple things that I didn't enjoy, but I'll say overall it's a rather pleasant and enjoyable game. I think that this is probably, of the ones I've played of Commands and Colors, probably my favorite of the series. And what I want to do is explain why I enjoy it. And I'll just hold up some components here and there, and then if I need to, I'll swing the camera down to give you like a top-down view. So first thing that I want to talk about that I thought was really good is the updated dice. Now I'm calling these updated dice because the other Commands and Colors I specifically have is Napoleonics, and their dice are nice, but they're stickers, so you got to put the stickers on the dice. So these are, the symbols are like printed right onto them, and they haven't like scratched or come close to rubbing off. They're all really good, so they're put on here really nice. So the dice are really good. The other, it's not even under the Commands and Colors, but like Memoir 44, which is like the similar engine. Those dice are wooden. They're pretty good too, and the symbols are etched into those. But I would say so far, a little simple thing like this, it's quality. I really enjoy these dice because you use them for just about everything. So it was really nice having some dice that were professionally put together for me. The other thing too is the blocks and the block art. They're pretty good, I think. I think they represent the units very well. The art kind of has like a block art, almost kind of watercolory look, which, you know, kind of seems to hold true for the fashion, but, you know, like they're kind of similar looking in Napoleonics a little bit. I wouldn't say they're watercolory, but they're not like photorealistic. But that tends to work really good here with Napoleonics. It just seems to fit because a lot of things that I see that have, you know, kind of the Japanese feel has like watercolor looks to it. So the components are very nice, the artwork is nice, and there's a pretty good amount of units. A comment that someone put on I think it was a comment from the last video, talked about, I think maybe they meant in the scenario there was like a lack of different types of units, which is true because the scenario that I first did, the very first one, is like a training scenario, and there's like no diversity between the two engaging troops. They were the same. But I think they have a fair amount of troops here that you could talk about, and they're represented very well. Their strengths and weaknesses, what differentiates them, I think is done very well. So if you compare to, say, Napoleonics, I think Napoleonics might have a few more different types of troops than, say, the Commands and Colors Samurai Battles. But what you have here in the Samurai Battles really makes sense. So I also like the way that they're kind of arranged in their power level down. So when you're starting off, you've got like the Samurai Cavalry. This is the mounted spearmen, if you will, and then there's like the mounted bowmen. Gotta get used to holding the camera to show you stuff. And then you have the samurai spearmen, and there's like samurai bowmen, and there's quite a few of the samurai. And then it does seem to kind of repeat a little bit with regular spearmen, and then lower ranking archers, and then the arquebusiers, the gunners, and then finally the levy. On the back, there's some leader information. There's like an overall commander down here with the bodyguards. So, you know, leaders are on the back. But the thing, here's what I wanted to talk about. And I wasn't quite sure how to discuss the diversity in troop types without, I don't know, maybe making something that isn't there. Another game that I've seen played, there were comments in the game, but not in the game, but about the game, where some folks said that there might be too much samurai worship, if you will, and the idea that the person was trying to put is that samurai were actually the top of a caste system which oppressed people and was terrible to peasants and things like that. And they were trying to, kind of attack the game in that way. They were unhappy with the game, so that was kind of a way that they went. So, what does that have to do with Samurai Battles when the game isn't talking about social, economics, and it's not talking about social interactions between like the caste system? This is a war game, strictly a war game, and it's not here to teach us anything about that. But, I hear things, it sticks with me, and when I was playing this, I said, well, how does that affect the game? Well, it kind of shows the outcome of that caste system and what happens when you're at the top of the tier, if you will. So, being at the top of the tier, the samurai actually have really, really good statistics. For example, their mounted cavalry can move. They're the only mounted in here, so they're like the knights of Europe kind of a thing. And so they can move and attack. But what's really, really strong is how well they attack. So they're going to get 4 dice. We're talking the mounted spearmen, if you will. Okay, so they're going to get 4 attack dice. That represents training. That represents their equipment. That represents they have good horses. There's several things that they have advantage-wise that the levy, the peasants, and lower-ranking Ashigaru troops don't have. So yeah, that privilege of the caste system gives them definite advantages that other folks don't have. So for example, in the armor, because again of their good training and the fact that they're equipped well, they can actually ignore certain melee hits. So for example, they get to ignore one of the swords that you roll, and the sword in melee damages whatever it's rolled against. But they can ignore one of those. And if the attack comes from a lower ranking unit, so whether it's a blue triangle or this green circle, they can ignore 1 sword from the blue triangle, 2 swords from the green. And that's because as you move down the list here, they're more poorly trained and poorly equipped. So, did Japan back in the ancient days have a caste system? They did, and it did offer quite a few advantages to the upper caste than the lower caste systems had. So, this game isn't designed to teach you that kind of stuff, but I think it's brilliantly laid out, and you can see the results of that. So, I just thought I'd bring that up because it was an interesting thought to me. Alright, but now we know why the samurai were such better equipped than, say, their counterparts. Let's talk about game mechanics. And yeah, those things come into the game mechanics, and they're really, really, they play a big part. When you're setting up your attacks and your defenses, then you have to really, really think about, okay, who's going to push the attack? Am I sending the samurai in? Am I going to lead with my Ashigaru to absorb, say, some bow hits or whatever, sacrifice those units? It really gets you thinking about how those units can interact. Almost, there's not even like a rock, paper, scissors kind of a thing. Because normally, depending on your game system, there's a lot of rock, paper, scissors. Like I send spearmen against horses. I send horses against archers, kind of a thing. In here, that doesn't quite work the same way because the rock, paper, scissors effect just doesn't really exist. You have to really think about, how am I going to use these units? Which ones will I sacrifice to try and absorb some hits from the samurai as I pull up my other units? Or do I just charge with the samurai to just punch holes and then my lesser folks come in? So there's no really kind of a rock, paper, scissors effect. I think that's fascinating. Now, as those mechanics play out, that affects something called the honor and fortune system. And here's a couple tokens from it. And this is basically a resource that you can spend to get some things called dragon cards. And the dragon cards, I think, are also a pretty cool mechanic. So the dragon cards are basically just a whole bunch of battlefield resources you can purchase. Here's one. Practice Aikido. You can play before your opponent's close combat roll. target one attacking enemy unit. Target rolls a maximum of 2 dice in this close combat. Nothing will increase this number, not even the play of a dragon card. That's cool. So you can essentially have your lesser Ashigaru troops go and attack a samurai unit, and when it tries to retaliate, it's only going to roll 2 dice versus like the 4 that it would normally get. So these dragon cards give you opportunity to, shape the battlefield. It's not a new concept to games. Lots of games have cards that you can purchase. So is this a card-driven game as far as the dragon cards? No, because you have to purchase them. You have to use your honor and fortune tokens to buy them. And so it becomes almost a limited resource. You can have as many of these as you want, because at the end of a turn you can either gain 2 honor and fortune, or you can pick up a card. So it just becomes a balance in how you want to spend this resource. And then each card has a cost, and some only cost 1. There's a couple that cost 0. There's some that cost 2. Here's one that costs 3. So obviously the more, here's one of the 2. So the more honor and fortune it takes to use the card, because you're going to purchase the effects, the more powerful it is. So the honor and fortune then is a resource that you're encouraged to use simply because you can potentially get some every turn. Not a whole lot, you get 2. But when you do combat, certain combat allows you to earn honor and fortune. So when you are rolling like close combat, it mostly occurs in close combat. There's a few situations where ranged combat can give it, but you roll this symbol, which is samurai, and you can gain an honor and fortune for each one of these rolls. So if you rolled 3 dice, I'm holding up 2, but let's say you rolled 3 dice and you came up with 2 honor and fortune, you would get 2 honor and fortune tokens. So there are ways to get it. There are other ways to get it. For example, those are the 2 biggest ones, combat and at the end of your turn. But there's another way to get it, which is like if your leader commits seppuku because he can't retreat, then you would get 5 honor and fortune tokens, for example. But what else can you spend it on? It's not just for dragon cards. So this resource is actually beneficial in something else too, and that is when you have a leader that wants to influence. If you have one of your leader tokens, you can use 1 honor and fortune point to influence combat by adding a die. So for each honor and fortune that you spend, you get 1 die. There's limits. So if you're a foot soldier, the foot soldier will benefit just the foot soldiers they're attached to, so they would spend 1 token and gain 1 die. But if you were a mounted leader, you can actually also influence those adjacent to you, and then for each adjacent unit that wants to, spend an honor and fortune, they can then gain a die. So if I was surrounded by a bunch of little infantry, then the leader can influence them, and you could spend, I guess that's like 7, because there's 6 hexes that surround you, and then the one that you're attached. That'd be a lot of honor and fortune, but a lot of dice roll benefits. The drawback to that is, for every honor and fortune that you spend to inspire your troops, you subtract 1 honor and fortune from dice rolls that you get. So if I really did spend 7 honor and fortune, and I rolled 7 dice for an attack, then if every single one of those was a honor and fortune symbol, I'd get no honor and fortune for that. So that's a drawback. You can inspire folks, but then they also put in some penalties to kind of balance out the power of this honor and fortune. It is meant to be used, so use it. I think the very first solo game I played, just to kind of get a feel for the game, because I wasn't using dragon cards, I just started to accumulate a whole lot of these honor and fortune tokens, and they really didn't seem that important. But they also have another importance. When you retreat a unit, so if you lose combat and they have to retreat, then based on how many hexes they fall back, you lose honor and fortune. So even though you're spending them and you're encouraged to, you also have to balance that against retreats, because if you have no honor and fortune to pay for the retreats, then you start to lose units instead. Now, this mechanic I thought was, it's cool, but I wasn't initially happy with the name Honor and Fortune, and I was mostly just calling it Honor. And to me, the samurai are, honor's what makes them. That's the epitome of being a samurai, is the honor that they have. And so to have that reduced to a resource that you use to spend on cards for things like ninja and whatnot, I didn't really like that name. I wanted to call it more like momentum. But then as I played more and started using like dragon cards, then I had to remember, well, this is actually called Honor and Fortune. And that is a very appropriate name, because when you do certain actions, like I said, if you have a leader that has to commit seppuku, they gain the honor and fortune. They earn some of their honor back. So that's appropriate and thematic. And the fact that it's fortune, well, then that's the resource that you're using to buy the dragon cards or to inspire people. Well, even it's your honor. The honor of that leader is inspiring people around them to do extra things. So the Honor and Fortune name, it actually sticks. I'm okay with that. But I don't know if I like that they put Samurai. I know they put Samurai because it's Samurai Battles. But if it's Honor and Fortune token, I was thinking, maybe they could use the actual character for Honor. That's not really a complaint. That was just more of a, Samurai. But this is Honor and Fortune, and neither one of these say Honor or Fortune. That says Samurai. So anyway, that's a cool mechanic. I think that's a fun element to the game. Now, as a solo player, I was hesitant to use Honor and Fortune, and I was mostly hesitant to use a dragon card. Using the Honor and Fortune really isn't too bad, but if you don't play with the dragon cards, then instead of getting like 2 Honor and Fortune at the end of the turn, just give yourself 1. That way you still have something to pay for retreats or to cover when you want to inspire troops on the battlefield, but you don't have to collect a whole lot to pay for expensive dragon cards. Now, why would you not want to use dragon cards? Well, when I first was playing solo, I didn't want to use dragon cards because a personal me, not a game fault, but me fault, is I sometimes forget I have dragon cards, or I remember that they're there, but I'm trying to track my dragon cards and my AI opponent's dragon cards, and I just lose track of it sometimes. So when I first started playing, I just ignored them altogether. Then when I finally decided to start playing with dragon cards in the last video I played, I said to myself, well, this isn't too bad. If you just remember to take a moment before you play yourself or the AI, just look over the dragon cards, and then you can, see what's applicable. It's really not that bad. I just had to slow down in my playing. And then I realized, well, some of these are kind of fun. So I don't think I would play the game without dragon cards, even solo. But I do think the dragon cards shine in a 2 or more player experience, because that's what helps you give the gotcha moments. Like, hey, here comes my advancing troops, and then you play Ninja Assassin, and you just happen to kill their leader. Cool, right? As a solo player, sometimes that's kind of like not as cool because you know what's out there. Nothing's a surprise. You just simply say to yourself, well, here's a card. Mechanically, this is what it does. I'll go ahead and play that for the AI. But in that 2 or more player experience, that's the fun part. You have that dragon card. You have some honor and fortune tokens in your hand, and you hold them, and you're looking at the card while your opponent's trying to do something, and then they're wondering what you plan on doing, right? Maybe it makes them second guess themselves. It's all about the bluff, right? As soon as they start doing something and you go, oh, and you start looking at your dragon cards and you put one down and you grab some honor and fortune right as they're about to do something, that's the bluffing aspect that you don't get in a solo game. So I still recommend that you use the dragon cards. They're very thematic, add flavor even in a single player experience, but would be a shame if you did not use them in a multiplayer experience. So I thoroughly enjoy the dragon cards. Glad they're there. So what's the other set of cards? If you're familiar with Commands and Colors, or like Memoir or Battle Lore or Battle Cry, any of those, there's a American War for Independence one. These cards drive the game. This is the card-driven part. They're the orders. So if you're not familiar, basically you just draw one, and it's going to say on there, your field is divided into 3 sections. There's a left, right, and a center. So you got flanks in the middle. And it will tell you, in the most basic of terms, how many units you can activate in one of those areas, whether it's the left, right flank, center field, and then you would activate them for moving in combat. And then you're done. And some of them, like this one here says based on how many cards you're holding, including the command card. This one specifically says 2 in your left section. So they might specify based on certain conditions what you could do. Some of them say if that affects units that have the blue triangle, for example, or like here's an infantry onslaught. So it says 4 or less infantry units, as long as they're linked together, so it doesn't matter if it's, you know, left, right, center, as long as they meet the conditions to use the card. So it spices things up a little bit. I like this system. I've always thought that this was a good system. This was actually especially fun, like when my son, when he was younger, because sometimes these games you have a lot of units on the board, and that might feel a little overwhelming sometimes, like what should I do? What can I do? Well, the cards really help alleviate that, especially in a solo situation. Draw a card for your AI opponent and work as best you can. And you're under the same limitations. You have a set of cards for yourself, pick the one you want to use. So there's no really outplaying the AI when you solo play, because you're both drawing from the same system of cards, and it helps you pick, okay, here's what the computer will do. I'd say computer, but here's what your AI opponent will do this moment. So I think it's a brilliant card system. I know I play some games where people want like full autonomy to pick one of units, do what, when, and you're moving everything on the field of battle. Yeah, there's a place for those games. I think, though, that what sometimes those games miss out on is command and control issues, where your main leader sends issues out to the subordinate units and how the subordinate units will interpret that. When you just control everything, then it's like perfect knowledge. And the only thing that might mess it up is dice rolls for combat, how well they fight. But I don't think there's perfect command and control on a battlefield. Even when I was in the Army and we had fairly modern, at the time, communications with, you know, encrypted radios and nearly real-time communication, there were still problems that crept up because maybe communications didn't come through or didn't come at all. And so sometimes we were left to our own devices and it took a little longer to coordinate. They didn't have that at all back then. So if you have a table full of units and you can only draw a card that says activate 1, I guess there was some very poor battlefield communication that day. Things that we can't see as the overall, you know, omniscient, godlike view. There was something we didn't see on the battlefield, but your little block soldiers, it affected them. So I have no problem with the card system. I think this is brilliant. It works out great. And I'm actually glad the cards are here. I think when I first did an unboxing, I mentioned the story where I bought the game by Zvezda, the Samurai Battles game from Zvezda, and that was supposed to have 2 game systems, the Commands and Colors, and then the, I forget what system it is called for Zvezda, but they have their own system that drives like their World War II game. Well, they had it in the Samurai Battle. I think it's a pretty cool system. However, my box didn't have either set of cards. I couldn't play the game, either game at all. So having these, it just brought back memories from that time. Like, oh, I almost got to play Commands and Colors Samurai Battles years ago, but I had to wait until it finally came out with GMT Games, and I'm glad it did. So that's a few things I've enjoyed so far, like the artwork on the blocks, the dice, the Honor and Fortune is a pretty cool system that I enjoy. I still really like the card-driven options that you get for the orders. The dragon cards are a good addition. I think it adds a lot of thematic flavor to the game. The token quality, not that there's a whole lot of tokens. You get some flag units, and they're okay. I mean, this isn't a heavy cardboard counter-driven game, but the pieces they give you are very functional and they work. And the tiles, This is the only other thing I'm going to gripe about, and then we'll call it a day. The tile system here to make your map dynamic is for me, is a necessary evil. I didn't like it in Memoir 44. I didn't like it in Napoleonics, and I'm not a fan of it here. But it's necessary because the map you get, it's a pretty artwork, but it's got nothing on it, just an open plain. And it's these tiles that generate the rivers, the mountains, the forests. I really didn't notice any town terrain ones. I know in Napoleonics you'd get like some little town ones. So there's really not a whole lot of terrain for the Samurai Battles that goes on the map. I don't remember seeing any villages. I won't say there's not any, but if there is, they're few and far between. So it's mostly just hills, rivers, roads, and some mountains and forests. But the thing is, you got to look at the scenario book and lay out all the tiles on your map to set it up. Functional, sure, it works, but it's that tedium that you have to do it for every single scenario. So then you might say, well then, Eddie, smarty, what would your solution be? Well, that's the necessary evil part. The solution would be that you include, where's the scenario book? None of those maps repeat. So you would have 40 scenarios that would each need their own paper map. And yeah, nobody wants to put that in a game. Can you imagine how much more the cost would be to have 40 printed maps on paper that you could play? Double-side them, that's 20 double-sided maps. And the map is a pretty decent table size. Nobody wants that. Or maybe you do want that. I'm sure at some point you could scan and print and make your own custom maps for particular scenarios that you like, and then you would never have to set up the tiles. Great. But until you do that, or GMT does that for me, or somebody, I got to use these tiles. And that's, for me, is a necessary evil. Because some of them have rivers on the back. So if you have a river scenario, you got to make sure that you're in, and forest, you got to make sure that you're finding a forest river combo tile where, okay, I'll use, well, these two forests have rivers on the back. So there's a combination of some where there's not a river on the back of the forest. So a lot of it just comes to flipping, make sure I get the right tiles so that I can have enough forest and rivers. Same with like roads, get enough for roads and rivers. I don't know. It's not that bad. It's just that's the only part of setup to the game that I find tedious, is digging through my tiles, putting them on the map board, and then as I play I'm sometimes bumping them. But again, your mileage may vary on that. That's just Eddie's complaint with the tiles. But I use them, I need them, because that gives me 40 scenarios using one map, and then I can make any scenario I want, because I can make my own and use the terrain pieces. So again, necessary evil. Necessary annoyance. So yeah, I'm digging, because if I don't put anything I don't like, then people just say, oh, you know, he's just completely selling out. But honestly, it's just a couple the little nitpicks of the game that stand out to me, because overall it's a very good package. So a couple questions I like to ask myself or other people is, would you pay for it then? So this is the disclaimer. This was sent to me by GMT Games for the purpose of review and to like play and put some videos out. But had they not, I still would have bought it at some point. Like I bought Napoleonics. It took me years to get Napoleonics, but I finally bought it and I enjoyed it. And the Samurai Battles, I thought, well, let me see if I can get in there and see if I can do some videos for them if they'd send me one. And they did. So then I like to point that out, because I don't want people to think then that my thoughts are purely from the point of view of, you know, because they sent it to me. I actually truly really do enjoy this game. I thought it was great. It's fun. I'll tell you why. When I play Napoleonics, I don't play Napoleonics well, the Napoleonics commands in color that I have up here, because I'm very hesitant with that game, because I always feel like if I just move some troops forward, they lose like their ability to fight, or it's really severely degraded. and everybody on the other team gets to shoot several hexes out. So I always feel like if I move forward, they're just getting shot, and they don't really get to fight themselves. They just kind of get up there and die. So I'm always very hesitant and not wanting to move people forward. So it makes for just a very not fun game. Mechanics are good. They've got form square. So Napoleonics is great. But I don't play it well. But with Samurai Battles, I don't feel that way at all. I actually enjoy charging people forward because even though you still have some archers that can shoot out 3 hexes, you're going to take some hits maybe, but it just feels right. Especially when you have samurai that can absorb some hits and they're designed to charge on the field and run into units and take those hits. I don't feel like it's a wasted cause. I know I can maybe try to break through with some of these guys and then follow behind with other people, and it just feels right. I'm not sure what the difference is, but for me, thematically, this game just kind of runs that type of warfare better. I haven't played Ancients, but to me, I'm thinking Ancients must be similar. There's a certain amount of no hesitancy in rushing your troops forward because it doesn't feel like they're just going to get slaughtered by long-range rifles. But again, I could be playing Napoleonics wrong. That's just how I feel. But this, I feel emboldened to charge forward. Also, with this, I think maybe the medieval style kind of reminds me of that. So I might want to try that one next. Because again, there's not a whole lot of long-range rifle fire. So again, I might be over-exaggerating my complaints with Napoleonics because there's artillery and things. But this game feels like it was designed to do those mass battles where the units are just coming at each other, and it's okay if you take some losses because they're supposed to be fighting, and it feels really good. So I thoroughly enjoy this game. So again, would I buy it? Yeah, I totally would. And let's say you already have a lot of Commands and Colors Napoleonics. Do you need to add another Commands and Colors to your system? Maybe you've purchased and you have everything for Napoleonics. Why add another game? That's, I think, because this plays and feels a lot different than Napoleonics. And I'm mostly comparing it to Napoleonics, but again, if I was to say, maybe you collect a lot of Memoir 44. Thematically, Memoir 44 does World War II, but I know some people complain about the scaling in there, because tanks shooting only a few hexes, but they can actually shoot very far. Sometimes that is compressed too much as far as what feels like World War II combat. You don't have that feeling here at all. The blocks of men and having all the units spread out across the field just feels like you're looking at fields of men that are charging each other. So Napoleonics, I think, still gives you a pretty good sense of scale of seeing your troops spread out across the field and they're marching forward in line. But something about the Commands and Colors Samurai Battles, it, for me, just clicks better. And that could be mostly just because I actually really do enjoy Japanese history as far as like the samurai warring states. I like watching samurai movies. So maybe the theme just clicks better, which is why I like it. So that might be another reason to pick it up. Thematically, I think this does a really good job of bringing in that Japanese feel. Again, with like your dragon cards that you can use to influence battle, they're very thematic. You have the honor and fortune where your leaders and units individual honor, for facing retreat and losing honor. Those things add to a theme that I think plays out really, really well. So why would you not buy it then? I guess just for the same reason. If you just feel like you're completely overloaded on Commands and Colors and you want to take a break from it, that'd be like the only reason I could think why you wouldn't want this. Because mechanically it's a sound game. I mean, that might be the only thing is maybe you hate these kind of card-driven games, which I think, again, even here for the Commands and Colors Samurai, I think it fits very well, because it really makes you then think about, with your limited resources, how best to use those troops on the field, how to overcome those lack of pure, omniscient, communicative ability that you have. How do I make things work with that limited communication. I think it works out really, really well. But again, that's my opinion. So I would recommend this if you've been thinking about it. I don't think you'd be disappointed at all to pick it up. Plus, it does have 40 scenarios. That's a lot of gameplay. I think that this is going to give you a lot of value for a while. Even if you did one battle a day, that's well over a month of gameplay, and you're going to recoup your money back in no time, just in gameplay time. So those are some thoughts that I have. I didn't want to call this a review, again, because they did send me the game, and I didn't want anybody to think that my thoughts were tainted by that. So I really just wanted to share with you why I like the game, why I think it would be worth you to pick up, and then, you know, maybe why you wouldn't like it. So I hope that kind of gives you a balanced insight to the game, and I look forward to seeing you on another game. If you want to see more Samurai Battles played out by me, yeah, don't hesitate to let me know. Someone already said they'd like to see me do all 40 scenarios. I'm not sure that's going to happen. I have a very short attention span to stuff, but if you do want to see more, let me know, and I'd love to bring this back out to the table. So again, thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video. All right, bye.